So Kismet it is today, right? So I honestly had to look up the word Kismet when I was invited to do the talk here. I don't know what it meant. And I found out it's a Turkish word, meaning in nowadays translation something like good fate or destiny. And then I was like, okay, now I know why they asked me to do this talk, because I got some stories to tell about Kismet. And I'm gonna start today by sharing a little Kismet story with you. And it actually sounds like a fairy tale, but it's a true story. So, once upon a time, there was a girl who went to the annual beer festival of her town. And it was the biggest in the whole country, and everyone was there to enjoy themselves. There she met a guy. He was handsome, good looking, had good manners, and he was quite different from all the others she had ever met before. He came from a country far, far away, where it's never getting cold and they dance day and night, Brazil. And so they fell in love, Kismet, and they decided to be together. But shortly after that happened, Kismet happened again. And he was relocated to a country far, far away, where dreams are supposed to become true, the US. And he asked her to go with him, and she said yes. And they moved there, they traveled the world, they got married, they started to have a family, they had a little son, and they lived happily ever after. Great story, right? Well, it's my story. And maybe by hearing this story, you have already made up some assumptions, like about my life, or maybe you thought something like, oh, this is great, I would want this as well. Or maybe you also thought, oh my God, I would never do this. And actually it's interesting, when we hear stories like this, we immediately make like assumptions and we immediately judge, even unconsciously. And it's interesting because when a person walks into a room, we judge in under a second. It's like the first impression, it just happens. And let me tell you the following. You don't know nothing about my story yet. And sometimes it needs a little bit more than just the Kismet moments for the real story. But we're gonna get there. But first of all, I would like to know a little bit more about you guys. So I was wondering, who of you has already worked and lived in another country like where they grew up in? Please raise your hand. Great. And for who of you, Germany is not their country of origin? Yeah, I was already warned. We have a pretty international crowd here, which is great. So you already know what it means to live outside your comfort zone, right? And this is actually what we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna talk about living abroad, which is a big, big topic of its own, like all the issues, all the challenges that you have. But then we're also gonna talk about being a woman, which is a whole topic for itself as well. So I'm gonna try to talk about both, and actually about the condensation of issues. You see, like when you mix this, there is a new color. And this is actually what happens when you're a woman living abroad. You experience the issues of living abroad and the things that come with it. But also you have still the things and maybe sometimes also the challenges that women in our society have. So these days we're talking a lot about female empowerment, right? And we have, we're celebrating, in March we're celebrating Women's Day and stuff. But how can female empowerment actually look like in an international environment? This is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about who are these women who actually are living abroad, why did they choose to move abroad. We're going to see what kind of challenges they face. And then we're going to see what can they actually do, or some of them do, to empower themselves. And what can society do to support and empower women globally? And of course, I have to say, I'm talking about international empowerment, and it's a very, very big topic. So there are just, I cannot, touch everything, of course. So it's just going to be a glimpse into this whole topic. So who are these women, and why do they live abroad? You might think, okay, that's a stupid question, because men and women and people in general are living abroad for a variety of reasons. And that's right. But if we have a closer look about women who are actually living abroad, then there are two groups of women. Maybe you could divide them into two groups. So there is the group who didn't have a choice, who actually had maybe to flee from war or from violence, that just, couldn't, make the choice. They just had to go and live abroad. And then there is this group of women who actually have had a choice. And the first group of women who didn't have a choice, these are women like refugees, for example, which is unfortunately a very relevant topic today. And I'm not going to talk about these women today. There might be some similarities, there might be some things that they could adapt, but I'm going to talk about the other group today, because it's just not enough time, and it's also not my expertise. So I'm going to talk about the group of women who actually has had a choice. And these women are women like, for example, the typical expat. So you move for work. But then there are also women maybe more like immigrants that maybe thought, okay, I think I'm gonna have a better life in another country, so I'm gonna go there. And then there are these adventurous people, right? You see them on Insta, they're traveling the world and living in their little campers. And then you have maybe people with several nationalities who are have different nationalities already in their roots, so they choose to live in different countries. And then you have women who move because of a relationship, and often because of love. And this can be also a mix of all the above that I already mentioned. For example, you can move for love, but you're also adventurous. Or you can move for love, but you think, okay, I'm gonna have a better life there. So it's a mix of things, actually. So, but when we're actually talking, I was talking about choice. So what choice actually means is the ability to freely decide between alternatives. And when you think about having a choice and freely deciding between alternatives that are equally good, and actually choice means, or the free will is supposed to mean that you actually are not influenced by any person or surrounding, then it already gets difficult, because actually think about making a decision without being influenced by no one, by nothing that happened before. So it's already a gray area. So I just want you to keep that in mind when we're going to talk about women who actually moved abroad. So I told you my Kismet story, and I made the decision to move abroad for love. And I moved to Miami, to the US. And there I started a project called Women Who Love. And I interviewed women who had made a similar decision as I had. And I wanted to tell their stories because they were so interesting and so complex. And actually, the more international women I found, the more unique stories I found. So, but on the other hand, there were a lot of similarities. And I want to introduce you to some of them. So meet Barbara. Barbara was 46 when I first met her in Miami, 2016. Barbara is originally Italian. She's a social anthropologist. And when she moved to Miami, she had been moving from Guatemala, where she had lived 23 years of her life before. She had had a family there, so she had 2 daughters. She had a marriage there with an Italian guy that she was divorced for the last 8 years. And she was a very independent woman, a feminist, a business owner. She had a very famous restaurant in Antigua, Guatemala called La Opera. So Barbara is a full woman, a Latina of power. And I met her when coming to Miami, and she just moved there 2 weeks ago. And a lot of things changed actually when she moved to Miami. So why did she move? Because of love. When she was in vacation from Miami, she was tired of the restaurant, and you know, her ex-husband, and everything was quite difficult. So she went to Miami to have a little vacation. She met a fisherman there from the US, Michael, and they fell in love, and they did half a year back and forth. And then they decided to, you know, start a new life together, both in their late 40s. And they decided to get married for that, because obviously she couldn't just move to the US. They needed a visa. So they got married. And it was very difficult for her because she was very dependent from her husband at the beginning. She was in this whole visa process. So the first 6 months she couldn't work because it wasn't allowed. And also she couldn't leave the country because her lawyer strongly advised her to actually stay in the country, to not risk the green card process. They were also interviewed and checked on if it's a fake marriage and stuff. So it was difficult for her. And she couldn't see her daughters, and her daughters studied in another country, so they couldn't, you know, just come randomly. When she got married, she was all alone by herself, just she and her and him and, you know, some of his friends. And later, once she actually received her work permit, she started as an assistant manager in the restaurant where Michael worked as well as a waiter. So from being a business owner, very independent, to being an immigrant with a language barrier, because her Spanish was perfect, which is important in Miami, but her English was not so good. So then to be this immigrant assistant manager, it was quite, you know, a change for her. Let me introduce you to Camila. When I met Camila for the first time, it was also in 2016. And she was 37. Camila is from Sao Paulo in Brazil. And she studied computer science, and she was very successful in her career. She was a project manager. She loved to work. She loved to go out. She was an independent woman. She had met her husband in Brazil, who was also Brazilian. They had a little son. They had a dog and a cat. They had bought an apartment. So perfect life. She was very also into her family, so like her whole family, so it was really important to her to be with them. And so she would never have thought to move abroad. She was like, my life is perfect, I don't need anything else. But what happened is that shortly before her son was born, when she was 8 months pregnant, she was robbed, which is unfortunately very normal in Sao Paulo. So they put a gun on her head, they robbed everything, And she was very lucky because the baby was fine and nothing happened to the baby. And after that, she actually thought, like, how do I actually want to raise my son? Like, in which kind of country will he grow up? So she changed a little bit her perspective. And once Augusto, her husband, got the opportunity to have a job in Miami, she thought not only about herself and her very good life in Brazil, but she thought about the life of her kids and like how they are gonna grow up. So she made the decision with her husband to move to Miami. But as it often is so, he got this working visa for himself, she got a spouse visa, so she was not allowed to work with this visa. This is unfortunately this happens very often, especially in the US. So you have these spouses who can just not work. And this was not like, some months. This was just, you can stay here, but you can't work. You can't even work voluntarily, like things like that. So it was very hard for her because before she had been this super independent woman, and now she was financially dependent on her husband. She couldn't work. She was seen as this expat, typical housewife in Miami, bringing her son to school and then, hanging out at the pool. That's what people were thinking, right? And like, she was not well at the beginning, but no one could understand her because her friends at home, they were like, man, and just enjoy Miami, it's great, so just enjoy life there. And then she was like, yeah, but it's not the life I wanted. I love my work. I want to do something else. I don't want to stay at home and clean the kitchen. And then on the other hand, there were these people in Miami also, like other women that were super business women, and she felt also judged by them because she would go home and, do the household. So she also had this language barrier, obviously, so her English was not so good. So she was also socially isolated because she didn't have work colleagues. And then she found some friends, but she had a little son. So when her friends would go out and party, she would stay home because, she had a little son. And also her husband would travel a lot, so she didn't want to have another babysitter at night for her son. But for the first time in her life, she also felt secure. She went outside, strolling at the sea, not looking back if someone would put a gun on her head. So this was really an advantage. And when I interviewed Camila, she said the following: we as women are often so underestimated. We have to be so many things in our society, and we judge ourselves way too much. We have to be successful with a good job, good looking, caring for the children, be good wives, and still we are the ones who mostly take care of the house. And I think this is very interesting because we as women, we know this feeling, like most of us, even if we didn't move abroad. And these are expectations from society, let's call it like this, we can't deny. We can say, fuck them, not gonna do it, but we can't deny them. And I wanna get you some numbers, because what Camila actually talks about here a lot is care work. So care work is understood as the activity of caring and looking after someone. So for example, the children, but also your parents, your neighbors, your friends, helping out someone, getting groceries. But it's also the whole thing like cleaning, cooking, organizing, getting a birthday gift, whatever. All this is care work. So worldwide, 75% who do this care work are women, and only 25% men. And this work is mostly not paid, or paid very poorly. So actually the issue with Camila was she did have this care work before. She just didn't notice it so much. And now she didn't have, her job. So she was just responsible for actually care work. Let's get you some more numbers. So here you can see the gender pay gap in US. So this data is actually very actual from this year. And the average woman in the US earns 18% less than the average man. This is just data. And when you take things like race, for example, into consideration, then the difference goes up until 29%. Other factors than race that are proven to influence the pay gap are motherhood, unemployment, age, job level, education, and industry. So imagine like someone who's coming to another country. We already have this average pay gap without, even doing anything, and then you're maybe unemployed for some years, or you get another child, you're a mother, your education is not that valuable anymore. So this pay gap is just gonna, get bigger. Let's have a look to Germany for a second, because we're living in Germany, right? So Germany is even worse. You have 21% pay gap in Germany. And actually Germany is one of the worst countries in Europe. I looked it up. It's only Austria, Switzerland, and I think Estonia, which is above. So Germany is really, really bad. And when you look to the very right and you see the gender care gap in Germany, you can see that women in Germany are doing more than the double of care work than men do here. So it's better than, worldwide, but still there is a long way to go. So as you could see from my examples, like women who live internationally, and especially women who have these challenges at the beginning, they have like different challenges. So they have challenges that we all have, also men going abroad, but also since men more often are the expats, for example, and the spouses are women, women have more like these issues with legal and financial dependence. And then also professional, like sometimes your degree is just not recognized in another country. Of course, you have language barrier, culture shock, and the whole, emotional challenges that you have when moving abroad. Most of you already know that. But then we have also these structural challenges that we as women face in our society. So when these two are coming together, this is actually the circle, this condensation I was talking about at the beginning. And why am I telling you this? I don't want this to be a very negative talk, so you go out and be like, oh my God, it's all so depressing. No, I tell you this because it's knowledge, and knowledge is power. And I'm gonna tell you why. Let's talk about how women actually can empower themselves. So how can female empowerment look like when we talk internationally and we have all these challenges? So one of the first things that is very important to me is awareness, that you are aware of your situation. So when you're aware of your situation, it changes already your perspective. So I think what is very important is preparement, for example. So prepare yourself good and talk about the things that are going to happen. So if you're prepared on like what your situation is legally, how your visa will be, if you can work or if you can't work, or if you can only stay for a period of time, this helps you to plan better. And then also if you go with a partner, and this is about relationships, it's very important talk about this situation, like how are we going to do it, like how are we going to do it financially? Are we both having an account, like, or do I have to go and ask you for money? This is not going to work. So also talking about finances is very, very important. Not just thinking, oh, it will turn out great, because actually this can give you power to actually have prepared well. And then knowledge, like I told you before. If you have the knowledge, you know there are some things that might happen, and there are some things that might be more on this situation abroad, like for example the cultural shock. So when you arrive in a country and you are super happy, but then you're coming into this crisis mode until you actually reach adaptation. If you know that this exists, you don't, ask yourself all the time, like, why am I feeling so strange, or why am I crying so much? It's more like, oh, I know others are going through this as well. It's just called cultural shock. So this helps. Then consciousness. So I would strongly advise to actually create a vision for your life abroad. So when people have a vision and people have a goal, it's much more easier to actually take the little steps to reach this goal, instead of taking the steps and not knowing where actually to go. Because on the way, we all know this, we have challenges and there's a wave coming that maybe is hitting us. But if we know where we want to go, then it can, destroy us. So this actually helps. And also you have to trust the process, because one thing I talked with many people about it before is very important is patience. It's not going to happen overnight. Most of you know this. And patience is really key. And having your vision and trusting the process. And last but not least, support. So first of all, you have to support yourself. Actually, when we think about, we made this decision, it's also good to take actually responsibility of the decision, because often we say like, oh, but this happened to me and now I'm in this situation. And yeah, that's right. But at the same time, if you take responsibility and you say, okay, but I made this decision also, maybe, as we talked about, choice is not that simple, but I made this decision at the end, and now I can actually work with this decision. And of course, if you're in a relationship, you need support from your partner, so this is very important. You have to ask for it. A lot of times we think, like, I need support, but give it to me. But actually you have to say like, support me. Sometimes they don't get it because they're just in a different situation. And then support can also be some other people, like a circle, like a community, like this community, or a community of like-minded people, a community of women that share similar decisions or share similar stories, and also, maybe also are totally different, but then you can embrace the differences. So Barbara said, when I interviewed her, we have to live this concept of sisterhood. We have to support each other. This circle makes you strong. And the solution must always include love. We can be feminists and accept love at the same time. And I think, this is a very, very true thing, because I feel like we as women, we have to support each other. We have to, make a circle where we actually help each other instead of judging each other. And the sociologist Franziska Schutzbach, which is from Switzerland and recently published a very, very good book about women, she says, when women take each other seriously as subjects, it changes not only their own lives, but the whole system. So we have to take ourselves seriously, like what do we want? And we have to take the other seriously as well. And then if we are building a community, we can really thrive something. We can actually also, reach our goals, maybe together. And the question is also like what you can ask yourself, like, from whom do I actually want acknowledgement? So when you're a woman, like, do I only seek acknowledgement from men or from people that actually don't have my values or actually maybe judge me because I made several decisions? Or do I seek acknowledgement from people who are actually having the same values as I do? And then, like, when you look for the right people, you're gonna, find your circle and not having the situation so much that you're being judged all the time, but more that you're actually being valued of you as an individual and who you are. But we can take about self-improvement and empowerment and everything to a certain degree, but then there's still the world outside. And we have some, things in society that need to change as well. And this is more the structural issues that I'm talking now about when coming to female empowerment. So what can society actually do? So first, as I said before, stop judging. I mean, we all judge, but we can, immediately once we catch us, we can reframe and we can ask, like, is this really, am I judging right now, or is this really true? Be empathetic. I think this is one of the key messages I have in this talk is, more empathy in the world and honor individuality and vulnerability. So if you see women that have a totally different life than you, just, ask them and be curious instead of just judging. As parents, what can we do? Like, we can be role models, and we can actually ask ourselves also, like, what kind of beliefs am I, living for my child? Like, am I giving my child with? So am I gonna say, like, oh, be careful, it's not gonna work? Or am I actually gonna say maybe something like, you're great, you're gonna make this. This is creating positive beliefs instead of limiting beliefs. And then, of course, we can all question our gender roles, like, how do we actually live gender? And do I have to tell my 3-year-old son, like, oh, get up, don't cry? Or can I say, it's okay to cry and to be Because out of this son, he's gonna be a man at some point, and there we are at a very important topic as well. What can men do? Because they can do a lot. So if a man is, able to show vulnerability and empathy, he's gonna show it towards men and women, right? So as a man, you can do so many things. You can support your partner. And I'm not talking about financial support. I'm talking about emotional support, but also about investing in your partner. So if you want to support financially, maybe it's better to, sometimes you have to do this, but it's more important to actually support in terms of you invest and in education, for example, or you invest in helping your partner getting a coach or a therapist or whatever she or he needs to actually reach her or his goals. And you can be a mentor to women, especially also in the business world. You can judge talent instead of gender, which is unfortunately not, in everyday life, it's different. And you can always stand up if you see some, injustice. You can always stand up with your friends, with your colleagues. And also as companies, you can, help people who actually have this visa issue to actually, get a visa or support them better, and also improve foreign assignments, because a lot of times in also big companies, foreign assignments, if people are sent abroad, they are still, seen as the people who work there, but not at the they are not seeing the whole family. So they are only supporting maybe with housing or stuff, but they are not supporting emotionally. And this is very, very important. So what are the takeaways for today? So the first takeaway is that choice is never that black and white. So every story is individual. So we cannot, make us immediate assumptions, because the stories are very complex that lead women to move abroad. And then we have these challenges that are, on the one hand, challenges we all experience because living abroad, and the other hand, because we are, the structural challenges we talked about. But the good thing is that knowledge is power. So if we know the challenges, we can, address them better. We can also decide which challenge we want to address, and which challenge maybe is, now it's not addressable because it's something bigger than just me, for example. And we learned that you can create your own vision. You can ask for support from your partner, from a coach, from a therapist, from a circle of people that are like-minded, and emotions are okay. It's just a process. So what happened to Barbara? Barbara, 6 years after this interview, she did a new education as a nurse, and she's now a nurse in the US, and she got her green card. And Camilla got her green card as well, and she stayed in Miami and works back in her old firm where she worked before, just in Miami now. And what about me? I told you I'm going to tell you my real story. So 8 years ago, I was actually 27 then. I was a general manager for a literature and theater festival. And I went to the Oktoberfest and I met a guy. And it took a while that we came together. It was not so easy at first. But once we finally decided we're going to be together, and we said, for the first time, I love you, he was relocated to Miami. And I said, okay, then this is it. Because I could have never imagined to live in Miami. Never, ever. But some days later already, we were experiencing like, okay, it's not that easy to just split up. So I decided actually to change my perspective, and I decided to give it a try. I said, okay, what's gonna happen? I'm gonna try it, and if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna go back. So I moved to Miami, and with a tourist visa for 6 months. I worked remotely. I rented my apartment. I quit my job. And we lived there. Everything was fine. Then we got married for the visa. And I stayed in Miami. And once I finally had found a job in the art industry in Miami, and everything was settled and everything was nice, we had our friends, our apartment, and we really arrived, we adapted. My husband was relocated again to Switzerland. And I was like, okay, Switzerland, well, this is actually great, it's closer to Germany, and Switzerland is almost like Germany. No. Big cultural shock, crisis. And it was actually very difficult for me at the beginning in Switzerland. I had to start again. I had to look for a job again. It took me almost a year to find a job because, I had some irregularities in my CV now. And I was early 30s, so people would ask me like, what are your plans? Are you planning to have a family? And you're not supposed to ask this in an interview, but people do. So once I finally found a job that was really, really cool and interesting and stuff, I found out I'm pregnant. So I had to start my new job. I was pregnant at the same time, like a lot of pressure, but everything turned out good. The pregnancy was not that easy, but everything turned out well. We had our little son. And 1.5 years after that, we decided to actually follow our paths. And my husband quit his job and I quit mine, and we decided to be, our own business owners and to be freelancers and to follow our desires. And I started the education as a coach. I did coaching before, so then I really found out that this is what I really love to do. It's actually to help people go through their challenges, to help people, creating their visions and achieving their goals or their desires or whatever it is. And I think it probably was exactly supposed to be like this. But I did my part as well. Kismet, right? Thank you.